The 2024 Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook is out, but you can use all of the old subclasses for any of the newer rules. So what is the best Druid subclass to play as no matter what you're using? Make sure to hit the like, subscribe, or notification bell if you want to make sure the algorithm knows you like D&D related content, but let's go ahead and dive in. There are some key differences in the rule set from the 2014 versus the 2024, but I'll dive into each aspect of them. But we gotta start going through those subclasses, starting with the Dreams Druid. The Circle of Dreams Druid is kind of vague in its idea, but it's definitely leaning a bit more towards healing. Its first feature, Balm of the Summer Court, gives you a pool of d6s to do some healing as a bonus action, which is kind of nice to have. It definitely emphasizes Druid's ability to heal, but they're not the best healer out of most of the subclasses. The second feature is Hearth of Moonlight and Shadow, which is just making it easier for you to safely take a rest, but there's a spell in D&D that already does that, but better, called Leomund's Tiny Hut. Pretty much everybody grabs it for a utility spell. Yeah, this will save you from wasting a memorized spell, but really, why waste an entire feature on it when you can get something so much better? Its next feature, Hidden Paths, gives you some teleportation, which is arguably very nice to have, and Walker in Dreams gives you some additional spells, including Teleportation Circle, which does have some more unique aspects to how it works. This subclass is just okay. It's not awesome. I am not a huge fan of what it does emphasize, and it doesn't really enhance you in too many great ways, so I gotta give it a C. And in this situation, C means it's not terrible, but I'd probably never actually play it if I wanted to build any sort of optimized character. But next up, we have the Circle of the Land Druid, and this has some key differences between the 2014 version and the 2024 version. Now, this entire subclass is around picking some sort of natural environment that you're more accustomed to, and then revolving the spells that you know around that idea. The 2014 version has way more lands to be aligned with than the 2024 version, but the 2024 still has better choices. Both versions are going to give you some additional corresponding spells with whatever land you choose, but the 2024 version, yeah, that's going to give you the Arid Land, which gives you some fire-based spells, and it actually gives you Fireball. Not to mention it also gives you Firebolt for a cantrip, and even Blight as a spell. There's also this new feature called Land's Aid, which is like an AoE damage and healing at the same time. This is awesome because this means that the 2024 version is really leaning into more party roles, where you are a bit further away, making sure that there's actually a tank or frontline DPS, and you can heal them while damaging all of the enemies that are around them. Then the next feature was Landstride, which was in the 2014 version, but it was way too specific. It made it so you could ignore difficult terrain from plants specifically, like the spell Spike Growth, but that's so specific that it's borderline useless in most situations. The 2024 version gives you Natural Recovery, which was actually a base ability in the 2014 version, but the 2024 version does make a few tweaks here and there. The old version allowed you to regain some spell slots on a short rest, but the new version does the same thing while also adding a bit, because it allows you to cast one of the spells that you get from your aligned natural environment and do so for free, but you can only do that once per long rest. Either way, it gives you some more spell casting, so overall it's just a slight enhancement on the original, even if it does come a little later. Both versions give Nature's Ward at level 10, which grants some poison immunity, but the new version also gives you some resistance to a particular type of elemental damage based off of whatever natural environment you're more accustomed to. The old version also gave you some additional defense against Fae and elementals, but again, this is way too specific. So I'm very happy that they overwrote this in the 2024 version. The last feature is Nature's Sanctuary. This was again both in the 2014 and 2024 version. 2014 just helped against plants and beasts. Again, way too specific. The new one's better. You basically create a Groot-style wall of thorn / barrier around you and your allies, or anything within a 15-foot cube that you can then move around. It provides half cover to anybody in that cube, while at the same time giving them resistance that you had gained from the previous feature. The old version wasn't bad, it was definitely a decent caster, but the new version is far superior. So I'm just going to worry about rating the new one, and I'm going to give it an A, because it's really solid, it expands your spell list, gives you some additional spellcasting ability and enhances it, and at the same time leans into party roles and gives some additional healing. Next up, we have the Moon Moon Druid. This is one of the most notable types of Druid because the Circle of the Moon is all about wild shapes. They have a new version in the 2024, but the old version did have some very significant issues. Most notably, the old version of the Druid only had 2 wild shapes to use until they got to max level. Then all of a sudden, they had infinite uses of wild shape, which is so strange that it didn't level up with you. In the new 2024 version, you get additional uses of wild shape as you level up in Druid. And on top of that, you can go ahead and spend spell slots to recover wild shape uses. You can also go the other way and spend some wild shapes to get more spell slots, but for the sake of the Moon Druid, which is all about transforming into your wild shape, you're going to want more uses of wild shape. This was a very needed change to Druids, and this makes the Circle of the Moon for 2024 way better overall. It does take away the 2014 versions of allowing you to do magical damage, but now you can do radiant damage or your normal damage, which I kind of like the flavor of, and there's other features in being the newer version of Druid that can enhance the overall damage that you're doing with melee attacks. So overall, you can just do more damage in every form if you want to, thanks to all of the changes being made in 2024. The only other big change is that the Moon Druid in 2014 could turn into an elemental. You can't do that anymore. But the old version would require you to spend both uses of your wild shape, so it was kind of a huge trade-off to sacrifice all that. Now, instead of turning it into an elemental, you get regular teleportation, which really is helpful considering you're more of a melee attacker if you're using your wild shapes. The last really big notable feature in the 2024 version is that you can immediately cast spells while in wild shape form, but you can only cast the spells of your specific Moon Druid spell list. You do get the ability to cast any other spells if you want to by leveling up significantly in Druid, but the fact that you can cast immediately by taking the subclass is a huge improvement as well. Overall, the 2024 version is insanely superior unless you were dealing with a max level campaign, which is super rare anyways, because unlimited wild shape is just gonna kind of make you invincible. But there are a few significant changes to wild shape that are worth noting if you do want to go Moon Druid. One, you're not getting a new pool of health anymore. You're getting temporary HP as part of your transformation, which means you can't be healed in wild shape form because you can't usually heal temp HP. That is a pretty big drawback, but the 2024 version is still better because there's also still one additional feature in that you get additional defense because it gives you an armor class by default when you're in wild shape form of 13 plus your wisdom modifier, as long as you're still a Moon Druid. This is a massive boon because before you'd have to rely on a spell like Bark Skin. Despite the fact that you cannot be healed, you still have more uses of wild shape if you need it, even if you're having to rely on that temp HP. So this Moon Druid in 2024 is just overall better, and I love the feel of it. It really feels like everything you'd want out of a more wild shape focused Druid. Not to mention there's even other ways to boost your damage with this subclass, which happens at 14th level, instead of granting you Alter Self that you can cast at will, which frankly I didn't know too many people actually bothering to use that feature in the 2014 version anyways. So with all of these enhancements and the overall feel of playing as a Moon Druid in the newer version, I gotta give it S tier. It's so much fun. I really love playing as the new Moon Druid. Next up, we got the Circle of the Sea, and this was a new one added in 2024, and it really focuses on its first feature, Wrath of the Sea, which is an emanation. It's essentially like an aura that springs up around you. Now, the most fun you're going to have with this is if you wind up having 2 sea druids at the same time, and I'll explain why in just a second. Activating your emanation requires you to spend one of your wild shapes. Then if a creature gets too close to you, they wind up being pushed 15 feet away and taking some damage. This does require you to use your bonus action to do so, but it deals an amount of damage equal to a number of d6s equal to your wisdom modifier, which is a pretty solid amount of damage. Only trouble is that you got to get pretty close, and it's a constitution save, which the higher up you get in levels, con saves are going to be harder and harder to get enemies to fail. At 6th level, the size of this aura/emanation increases to 10 feet from 5 feet, and you gain a swimming speed. At 10th level, you wind up getting a flying speed, as well as resistance to cold, lightning, and thunder damage, as long as your emanation is active at the time. And at level 14, you can actually activate your emanation on somebody else instead of yourself, or you can spend 2 uses of your wild shape to activate it on somebody else and yourself at the same time. So here's where it can get really ridiculous but fun at the same time. If you use this feature, or even early on if you have 2 sea druids, you can basically pinball an enemy back and forth over and over again, which is very annoying to deal with as a dungeon master, but it would be super fun as a player because you have 2 people about 15 feet apart, and then you wind up smacking them a bunch with some melee attacks or some spells. Then you activate your emanation and it bounces them 15 feet away towards your ally, and they wind up doing the same thing, bouncing them back to you, and you just keep doing that over and over again, and it's just tons of fun to play with. The biggest downsides here is that it does rely pretty heavily on positioning. You do have to be pretty close to your enemies, and druids are usually more casters, but if you do use Thorn Whip to pull somebody in and bounce them around with your emanation, that can be pretty fun, but that emanation does rely on con saves. So overall, this is a fun subclass. There's great ways to play with it, but it does rely pretty heavily on positioning and constitution saves, so I'm going to give it a B. Next up, we got the Shepherd Druid. Its first ability is called Speech of the Woods, which allows you to talk to animals, and this is entirely wasted because druids can speak with animals by default in the new player's handbook, so that's a bit of a downside. But outside of that, this subclass is pretty freaking awesome. The first thing it gets is a spirit totem, so it can place down this totem, and it has a massive area of effect. And that can either have a spirit of the bear, enhancing some strength stuff, or it can have spirit of the eagle, giving some advantage, or making it so people are better at their perception, or you can use it for what I think it's best at, healing. So if you activate the unicorn spirit, then anytime you do any healing using a spell slot, whether you're inside or outside of that aura, anybody inside of that aura gets healed for an amount equal to your druid level. That means that's a ton of healing because you can fit a ton of people into the area of effect that this encompasses. I mean, it's a 30-foot area of effect. You can fit tons of allies in there, but that's not actually the intended emphasis of this subclass because it's more about summoning. So the fact that it heals in an AoE, it's more about getting your summons in there, and your allies that get healed are just kind of a good side effect. The next feature gives your summons some additional health and gives them magical attacks if they didn't already have it. At 10th level, you get the feature Guardian Spirit, so if any of your summons or conjured creatures are in your area of effect and they just end their turn there, they get some healing right away. The amount of healing they get is equal to half of your druid level. And then you can also spend a spell slot to do some healing as well, which will again heal everything in that AoE. So you have tons and tons of healing, making it so your conjured or summoned creatures are insanely well taken care of. Then the last feature is kind of a weird addition, but I kind of love it. So if you get knocked down to 0 hit points, you automatically get Conjure Animals casted at the 9th level. It's a feature called Faithful Summons, and those summons immediately try to protect you in any way that they can. This is very helpful in some scenarios because I've been in the situation where I'm playing as a character and they get swarmed by like raptors or something and they just get completely eviscerated, and the DM doesn't want to do it, but he's trying to play the enemies how they would play, which is if they're gonna start attacking something, they're gonna do it nonstop until it's really dead. So the fact that this would protect against something like that is gonna be life-saving, so to speak. Overall, despite the fact that the very first feature with the Speak with Animals stuff kind of falls short with the newer abilities, everything else is pretty amazing, and it really boosts up a summoning idea. So I'm going to give this an S tier. It does everything it should for this type of build. Not to mention, it makes you one of the best AoE healers in the game, to the point that I added this to my original video about what the best healers in D&D are. Then we have the Stars Druid, and this one, I kind of don't even know why they bothered to include it in the 2024 book because it's basically the same as 2014. I feel like they were just trying to pad out the book to make it a little longer. But this is actually a pretty solid subclass. It's pretty versatile, so it doesn't have a hardcore focus for what this subclass is supposed to be able to do, but instead it gives you the option to amplify what most of Druids are able to do. You get to use a wild shape to take on a starry form, and you get to choose one of 3 different forms. One of them will boost your damage by allowing you to basically shoot out a star as your bonus action. One of them will boost your healing abilities, and the other will boost up your concentration checks. The level 6 feature allows you to boost or decrease a creature's d20 roll. The level 10 feature just boosts up your starry form, so you either deal more damage, more healing, or you get a flying speed. And then at level 14, they threw in having resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is kind of a lame capstone, and it's again something that barbarians get at level 1. So that one I don't really care that much about. But either way, this is a fairly decent subclass. It's versatile. It doesn't lock you into any particular role, but at the same time, it allows you to boost up the abilities that you do have. So it's fun to play. It's got a decent theme to it, and it's not overly powerful, but it's still good. So I'm going to give it a B. Next up, we have the Spores Druid, aka if you want to make Last of Us style mushroom zombies, and kind of become one yourself at the same time. The first ability is Halo of Spores. It allows you to use your reaction to deal some damage to somebody that's nearby. This again relies on your con save, but it's a reaction to do the damage, so you can still use your action and bonus action for other stuff. The other starting ability is Symbiotic Entity, so you can use your wild shape to awaken some fungal spores in yourself. It doubles the damage of your Halo ability, and it gives you a bunch of temp HP, so you're a bit more tanky in battle. Not to mention, your melee attacks do some extra damage as well, and that's actually going to be even better in the newer 2024 version, because there's other ways that your damage is enhanced. So if you have a spell like Shillelagh active, you can actually deal the extra damage this way, as well as the extra damage you would deal from your basic Druid stuff. So dealing a single attack is actually not terrible. It just means that you're riding a lot on one single melee attack. But I would probably still lean towards casting more often than not. At 6th level of this subclass, you get Fungal Infestation. So now you can actually take any nearby downed enemies and turn them into zombies to fight alongside you. These zombies aren't really enhanced in any sort of way, but it is still an army of zombies to back you up. Not to mention, you can go ahead and create some zombies as part of the spell list that you get from choosing the subclass in the first place. At 10th level of the subclass, you can turn your Halo of Spores into more of an AoE ranged attack, but you do lose the ability to use it right next to yourself anymore. Either way, it does give you some additional options, and having it more long ranged and focusing more on casting is usually a safer bet, because you don't always make the best tank, but it does try to lean into you being able to be tanky, and that's emphasized by what you get at 14th level, giving you resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is nice to have, but barbarians get that at level 1, so it's not quite as impactful as some other frontline fighting classes. But despite that capstone, it's still a very solid subclass. I kind of get grossed out by the idea of it with all of the fungal stuff, but it's still good. It's just not incredible. So I'm going to give it a B. So far, there's not any bad subclasses as far as Druid, but we do have one more to go, which is the Wildfire Druid. This focuses a lot on fire spells while enhancing your fire damage and some healing. So you can summon this like elemental thing to come and help you out. And that's kind of cool. It's kind of fun to play around with, this fire flame spirit thing. It aids you, it helps you heal or do damage, and it even allows you to teleport or even teleport with somebody. Or it even gives some magical flames that pop up when an enemy dies. The big issue I have with a Wildfire Druid though is that it's a fire-based Druid, but it doesn't give you Fireball.
And this is where I put it.
Fireball.
If I had one!
It's one of the most notable fire-based spells in D&D, and I don't know why they decided to leave it out. It's such an iconic spell that everybody loves to have in their arsenal, and I really wanted to give this subclass a B. I even have a friend that's playing this in a campaign right now. But the fact that it doesn't get Fireball, and the fact that the new 2024 Land Druid has some better options for fire-based spells, and if you really want a summon to help you out, there's a better summoning druid, or you can even cast summon elemental. Overall, they're just better subclasses to choose if you want a similar feel, especially if you want a fire-based druid. You can get more bang for your buck out of going with the new land druid. And I just can't get over the fact that it's a wildfire druid that doesn't get fireball. So I would give it a B, but I gotta drop it down to a C, which means that there's no straight up F tier subclasses for a druid, which I was kind of surprised with. I really like everything about how a druid works now. I would have probably rated a few things much more harshly with the 2014 rules, but 2024 really boosts them up in a lot of ways. Let me know what you think about this tier list, and if there's any different rankings that you'd go with, or what you think of the new 2024 Druid overall, because personally, I love it. I really want to play as one now, especially a Moon Druid. If you want access to optimized character sheets for all of these subclasses, I will be throwing them up on Patreon, where you can get access to the character sheets for all of my builds. Not to mention, you'd be supporting this channel and everything we do, just like some of these amazing people scrolling on by, or some especially awesome player character patrons: Alexander White, Ravelord, Nicole Biliak, Alone, The Holy 999s, Christopher Sams, Dark of Skies, Barrow Skrull, Felix Ulick, The 10586, Kevin Shirley, Zephyros, That Funny Man 57, Joshua Maynard, CGC 2014, Panda Milkshake, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Karkat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Zed13, Viral Nervar, Daniel Gavin, The Dino 21, and Salvador. Then there's the Dungeon Master level patrons that I play D&D with: Dante Dixon, John Rohr, T Brownie, Julie B. De Oliveira, Shane Gilroy, Daniel Saffler, Comments X, GameSteak, and Devin Happy. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as any sort of druid, especially in the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons.